Hello there. Welcome to another midweek meditation. I am Reverend Devin, and this is a weekly meditation that I do for my churches in Hyde Park, Bakersfield, and Jeffersonville, Vermont. This is also a meditation that I do for anybody who's joining in over YouTube and is looking to nurture a progressive faith. If you're looking for a second opinion on how we can build up a loving faith within our lives, I hope that you like and subscribe, and please feel free to share these videos with anybody you feel called to. Hello, brothers and sisters. This week we'll be talking about biblical law and how we use it. And so, let's get into our reading. Our reading today comes from Matthew chapter 5, verses 21 through 37. These are the words of Jesus. You have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not murder, and whoever murders shall be liable to judgment. But I say to you that if you are angry with a brother or sister, you will be liable to judgment. And if you insult a brother or sister, you will be liable to the council. And if you say, you fool, you will be liable to the hell of fire. So when you are offering your gift at the altar, if you remember that your brother or sister has something against you, leave your gift there before the altar and go. First be reconciled to your brother or sister, and then come and offer your gift. Come to terms quickly with your accuser while you are on the way to court with him. Or your accuser may hand you over to the judge, and the judge to the guard, and you will be thrown into prison. Truly I tell you, you will never get out until you have paid the last penny. You have heard that it was said, you shall not commit adultery. But I say to you that everyone who looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart. If your right eye causes you to sin, tear it out and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to be thrown into hell. And if your right hand causes you to sin, cut it off and throw it away. It is better for you to lose one of your members than for your whole body to go into hell. It was also said, whoever divorces his wife, let him give her a certificate of divorce. But I say to you that anyone who divorces his wife, except on the grounds of unchastity, causes her to commit adultery, and whoever marries a divorced woman commits adultery. Again, you have heard that it was said to those of ancient times, you shall not swear falsely, but carry out the vows you have made to the Lord. But I say to you, do not swear at all, either by heaven, for it is the throne of God, or by the earth, for it is the footstool, or by Jerusalem, for it is the city of the great King. And do not swear by your head, for you cannot make one hair white or black. Let your word be yes, yes, or no, no. Anything more than this comes from the evil one. These are the controversial words of the Messiah. So Jesus is doing two things in this passage from Matthew chapter 5. One, he's calling out divorce as it was practiced in Israel during the first century in his time. Two, he's calling out the way in which people use the law, in particular biblical law, to justify immoral action. Jesus was against divorce. This is something that is controversial to us nowadays because most Christians in the world today accept divorce as being something okay and moral. What Jesus is calling out here within this particular passage, I think we need to pay attention to this, and it's that divorce really was used in his day and age, especially by the rich, to disown wives that were not wanted, children that were not wanted. A person could divorce his wife and leave her with nothing, except for maybe the kids, and that person, the man could leave them with nothing too. And Jesus was calling this out as immoral, because even though through the laws of the Bible, the temple, the priest of the temple said that this was okay, Jesus was saying it violates the spirit of God's will, God's call for us to love and look out for each other. And Jesus says earlier in the passage, the law also tells us not to murder, but even if you are not going around killing people, we should still try to
do something about the hate in our hearts that causes us to want to harm other people. Just because we are obeying the law doesn't mean that we are necessarily living into the spirit of God's love. And so Jesus is saying pretty angrily here that we need to pay attention to that spirit. We need not just restrict our actions to fit into a legal code. We need to do our best to try to turn ourselves into the type of people who want to do God's will.
All right, it's been a week. What Jesus didn't like about this practice of using the law to basically justify ignoring God's will was that it made God seem like God didn't care about people. It made it seem like God was okay with people abandoning their families. It made it seem like God was okay with us harboring hate in our heart as long as we obeyed the laws as they were printed on paper, or in their time, papyrus. And Jesus tells us that that's not true. That's not who God is. And when we misuse the law in this way, we're misrepresenting God. We're making God seem less like a loving God and more like an authoritarian. And that is, in a lot of ways, an injustice against God. It's an injustice against those who are trying to find a loving God in their world. It's basically the fake news version of proclaiming the gospel. And so this is a part of the reason why Jesus angrily says that if we are using the law in a way that misrepresents God, they're bad laws. And we may hang on to those laws as if they were parts of our own bodies, an eye or a hand. We may rely upon them just as much as we do those because we're used to it. But if we are holding on to laws that tell us to ignore or push aside or to basically tell our brothers and sisters that, hey, you don't have a place here in church because you're married to a divorced person, or you don't have a place here in church because you're LGBTQ+, or saying things like you didn't show up to church for a long time. If you don't respect God, why should God respect you? You know, those type of sentiments don't reflect the love of God. This idea of an angry and judgmental God who is going to basically throw lightning down on you is not the type of God that Jesus is trying to introduce us to. And so there is a justifiable reason why he's using very angry language, because he himself is disturbed. And he's telling us to stop doing this. We need to recognize that we have a role to play in how people perceive God, because God's love works through us. And if we're not using the law to let God's love out into the world, then that is also on us. Christ is a gift to us within the Christian tradition because we believe that Jesus came to show us how we can better live into God's love. And along with that, Jesus shows us how we can better use the law to help us become loving people. And that is the ultimate goal. That is what he is saying here in this passage. It's not enough for us to just obey the law. We got to try to become loving people. If we can't do that, then we're not using the law appropriately. We're not following God in a way that is appropriate. And this passage in particular is very divisive because of the way in which it translates the laws of the Bible. Even within Christianity, we are still hung up on the words of the Bible, and there are many traditions that are rooted in interpreting the Bible as it is written and not going any deeper than the words that you see in front of you. Those traditions will look at a passage like this one from Matthew 5, and they'll say that this is a passage that is about murder, hatred, divorce, and infidelity, and that's it. And I would disagree with that because I come from a tradition, and many progressive traditions, not all, tend to look at the Bible as a reflection of God's will and God's love. And we need to recognize that if we're not using the law with God's love in mind, we're not using the law appropriately. Again, Jesus tells us earlier in this chapter, he came to fulfill the law, not to abolish it. Well, he's saying here that if we are not using love to translate the law, then the law is not fulfilled. If we are not using love to translate the law, then the law has no meaning. It is not useful to us. And if we are not using love when we translate the laws could become things that keep us from understanding God. And so if we're hung up on bad laws, Jesus tells us it's better to abandon those laws. It's better to let them go, even if we rely upon them like an arm or a leg or a hand or a foot or an eye. And that's tough. And I think that Jesus is trying to share with us that he knows that that's tough, but it's better than separating ourselves from God. And so this is a tough passage, and for many reasons. And I hope that at least maybe my take on it, my opinion on it, can help inform yours. As you maybe go through the Bible, I encourage reading it and try to see how a God of love is speaking to you through those words. Are the words important to you as you go through it? Or maybe there is a deeper meaning, a message behind the words that speaks to the will of God's love. Peace to you.